Germany began its rise in the latter half of the 19th century, defeating France and unifying the German-speaking regions. In the 20th century, it initiated two world wars, taking on European nations single-handedly and demonstrating formidable power that dominated the entire continent. Although Germany ultimately faced defeat in these wars, it managed to quickly recover and is thriving to this day. Germany remains a world-class country, leading European affairs. However, in history, Germany has been defeated 3 times and has risen again 3 times. Why is it that Germany always manages to come out on top? Today, we will explore the secrets behind this story. To understand this, we must begin with the precursor to modern Germany, the Holy Roman Empire. It has a long and illustrious history. In the Middle Ages, it wasn't a small nation by any means. Generally speaking, in the Middle Ages, England, France, and the Holy Roman Empire correspond to today's United Kingdom, France, and Germany, respectively. The Holy Roman Empire was once very powerful and initiated numerous military conflicts across Europe. But as England and France moved towards centralization and grew stronger as nations, the Roman Empire, on the other hand, began to disintegrate. The empire's local lords ruled independently, splitting it into hundreds of small states. The Roman emperor became a figurehead with no real power, and strong nations like England and France were content to see the Roman Empire remain in this weakened state. After the 30 Years' War, Germany was essentially a lagging region, while England and France were undergoing the Industrial Revolution. Germany was mainly focused on agriculture, and its power lagged behind the European powers. However, in the 19th century, the Kingdom of Prussia rose to prominence and successively defeated traditional powers like Austria and France, achieving the unification of Germany. Becoming the most powerful nation on the European continent, at the beginning of the 20th century, Germany's strength continued to grow, making it a global hub for science. Most Nobel Prize laureates were almost Germans at this time. It's worth noting that only a little less than 50 years had passed since Germany's unification, yet the country was reduced to rubble in just 2 world wars. Germany was left with just 1/3 of its territory, and its high-tech talent was poached by the United States and the Soviet Union. The nation was split into 4 zones of occupation. However, Germany quickly rose again, becoming an economic powerhouse. The key to Germany's ability to bounce back each time lies in its system of comprehensive education. So, let's begin our story with the Reformation. A young German fellow named Martin Luther believed that people could be saved by having faith in God, and the path to salvation lay in the Bible. According to Luther, people didn't need to study theology or rely on the church. They could communicate with God through the Bible. However, at that time, the general level of education among the people was quite low. How could people read the Bible if they couldn't understand it? So, Martin Luther proposed compulsory education and made the Bible accessible to everyone. He believed that education should not be a privilege of the church and nobility, but a right for all, regardless of gender. Although the widespread education promoted at that time challenged the dominance of the Catholic Church, it indirectly led to the birth of compulsory education in Germany. Some of the Protestant princely states that supported Martin Luther also began implementing compulsory education, such as Duke Ernst I of Saxe-Gotha, who issued school guidelines. These guidelines mandated that children must attend school starting at the age of 5, and parents would be fined if their children missed classes. After more than 30 years of effort, the educational standards in Gotha noticeably improved, to the extent that there was a proverb at the time: the farmers under Duke Ernst of Gotha are more educated than the nobles elsewhere. The school guidelines mentioned that beginners must learn hymns from the Bible, known as the Dominus. As students progressed to intermediate levels, they were expected to become familiar with Martin Luther's catechism. They also began learning how to read and perform basic arithmetic. In the higher grades, subjects like music and composition were included. Once they completed these studies, they could delve into scientific guidelines. At this point, the curriculum still predominantly revolved around religion, as education was aimed at promoting the Protestant faith and maintaining social order. This educational system went through the trials of the 30 Years' War. Overnight, the German-speaking regions regressed to a state reminiscent of pre-liberation times, with the economy set back by 2 centuries. Approximately 50% of the male population in various states perished, and around 8 million civilians lost their lives. The German-speaking regions became even more fragmented, splitting into 1,800 territories. However, the Kingdom of Prussia, located in the northeastern part, was relatively less affected by the turmoil. With the leadership of several capable kings, Prussia quickly stood out among the various states. At this time, Prussia's territory was not extensive, but was sandwiched between several powerful nations. To the west lay the Holy Roman Empire, which was more in name than in reality. It could essentially be disregarded, while to the south was the former powerhouse, France, during its heyday. After the 30 Years' War, it became the most powerful nation in Europe. To the south was Habsburg Austria, which was the most likely candidate at the time to unify the German Federation. To the east there was Poland, still holding its ground. Although not a direct threat, it was once Russia, with vast territory and a large population. To the north were Denmark and Sweden. These descendants of Viking pirates were also not the most benevolent. Prussia found itself sandwiched between these powerful nations, constantly facing the risk of being wiped out. In such circumstances, the military became Prussia's sole reliance. In 1713, King Frederick William I of Prussia ascended to the throne. He was a true enthusiast. During his reign, he implemented extreme militarism, greatly expanding the military forces. Prussia had a population of only 2.24 million people, ranking 13th in Europe. However, it boasted a soldier population of as many as 85,000, ranking 4th in Europe. Unlike other European monarchs who embraced extravagance, Prussian kings lived austere lives. William I was notably frugal, often referred to as the beggar king. He would allocate all saved funds towards education and the purchase of weapons and soldier training. Under his command, there was even a regiment of giant soldiers, known as the Potsdam Giants, who needed immense strength. Hence, taller men had an advantage, and there were rumors that William I would kidnap tall individuals from across Europe to enlist them in the giant regiment. Even tall women were not spared because they were to marry the male giants and produce a new generation of giants. In the end, history has shown that William I's militaristic policies were correct. Prussia's power increased significantly, but having a large military alone wasn't enough. It also required educated individuals who could be trained as mid-level and high-ranking officers, as well as talents for commerce and industry. A prosperous economy is crucial for a nation's strength. Therefore, in 1717, William I issued a decree mandating compulsory education. He decreed that children aged 5 to 12 must attend school. Then his wise and martial son, Frederick the Great, ascended the throne. In addition to continuing the path of militarism, he expanded the army to 160,000 soldiers and continued his father's education policy by building hundreds of schools, making it mandatory for children to start school at the age of 5. And he standardized textbooks, class schedules, and tuition fees. However, the results were not very satisfactory because parents were simply not willing to send their children to attend 6 years of primary school. At that time, it was an agricultural society, and children were valuable labor. In rural areas, children might only attend school during the winter when farm work was less demanding, and schools also lacked teachers with bachelor's education. Teachers were typically clergy or craftsmen, such as tailors, carpenters, and so on, who took up teaching as a side job to earn extra income. Later, veterans also joined the ranks of teachers. Therefore, one can imagine that many of these rural educators were simple folks who had some basic knowledge of reading and writing, along with rudimentary arithmetic skills. They often resorted to the use of whips and sticks for discipline. How could they possibly produce decent students? Nevertheless, at least Prussia became the world's first nation to promote universal education. Subsequent rulers of Prussia also continued this educational policy. However, in 1806, King William III of Prussia led his army to a devastating defeat by Napoleon at the Battle of Jena. After this battle, Prussia lost half of its territory and population and had to face massive reparations. However, even though Prussia was left in a dire state by France, they did not give up on compulsory education. In fact, they invested even more money and effort into it. As King William III said, "Perhaps because we are poor, we must educate more." I've never heard of a country becoming poor because of education either. The disastrous defeat at the Battle of Jena highlighted many of Prussia's shortcomings. Consequently, a reform movement emerged in Prussia, which included the creation of a constitution, the abolition of serfdom, and the promotion of industry and commerce. Among the reformers, Wilhelm von Humboldt, an aristocrat from Prussia, stood out. He was also an education reformer who revamped Prussia's cherished compulsory education system, ensuring equal educational opportunities for children of all classes. He introduced teacher certification, requiring secondary school teachers to be proficient in subjects like German, history, and mathematics, significantly raising the quality of education. This marked the beginning of Germany's initial compulsory education system, but it had a strong religious influence, and nowadays, the focus is on making the nation stronger, emphasizing practicality and knowledge. Compulsory education has become increasingly secular and no longer serves religious purposes. It includes basic German reading, writing, and arithmetic, along with moral education to instill a sense of responsibility and obedience in students. Students are required to wear uniforms to school. Taking attendance and following a class schedule clearly indicates that Prussian soldiers were cultivated from an early age through education. This naturally contributed to a strong military force. King William III donated his luxurious palace to establish Humboldt University, often regarded as the mother of modern universities in the world. The establishment of Humboldt University had a profound influence on Germany's future unification and rise. It marked the Prussian government's commitment to education as a means of national advancement. Many renowned scholars emerged from Humboldt University, with 57 Nobel Prize laureates among its alumni. In 1820, Prussia implemented compulsory education. They made education and military service national obligations, achieving a staggering enrollment rate of 97.5% at the time, nearly reaching full literacy. Every citizen could read and write. In contrast, countries like England and France had an illiteracy rate of 20%, while in European third-tier countries like Spain and Italy, it was around 50%. Russia, on the other hand, had an illiteracy rate of around 70%. The Qing dynasty in its childhood years need not be mentioned, as it had an illiteracy rate of 96%. Through a series of reforms, Prussia embarked on the path of industrialization and modernization. In 1870, Prussia decisively defeated France, capturing Emperor Napoleon III, marking a significant moment for Germany's unification. The following year, Germany's education became formalized and nationalized, with more schools being established. It's no wonder that Prussian Field Marshal Helmuth von Moltke once said, "German victory was decided on the elementary school teacher's lectern." The widespread availability of education also deepened the sense of national identity among Germans. Before the unification of Germany, the people in the German-speaking regions would only identify themselves as Bavarians or Prussians. However, after the unification of Germany, the idea of national unity deeply rooted itself, and everyone began to identify as Germans. Even in the post-war period, in regions like the Saarland, France attempted to make it independent, but ultimately couldn't succeed. In every referendum, the people there hoped to reunite with Germany. In addition, Germany's industrialization started very late, and initially it could only produce British products. The United Kingdom, in response, passed trademark laws requiring imported goods to be labeled with their country of origin, especially those marked made in Germany. At that time, German-made was synonymous with cheap. However, thanks to Humboldt's educational reforms, Germany established a solid foundation of scientific talent, which played a crucial role in the country's second industrial revolution. Highly educated workers undoubtedly had a better understanding of new technologies than illiterate individuals, and they could draw upon their knowledge to propose product improvements. This transformation turned Germany into a leading world power. Prussia's rapid rise, its ability to stand against major powers, and the unification of Germany within a short time frame, followed by Germany's ability to confront the world independently and rise from the ruins of World War II, all showcase the enduring vitality of the German nation. Education can be said to have played a pivotal role in these achievements. Speaking of this, everyone knows what happened afterward. In summary, the reason Germany could fall 3 times and still stand on the international stage today, holding a prominent position in the European Union for many years, is multifaceted. Education, however, is undoubtedly the most crucial factor among them. From education to military and political power, all these aspects are interconnected. Germany's strength is truly commendable. Thank you everyone for listening. If you made it this far, please leave a comment. Your support means a lot. Thought-provoking question: what other factors do you think aided Germany in her rapid comeback after defeats? Lastly, if being radical is the new norm, and objectivity is considered heretical, perhaps we should be radically objective. Thank you for your support. Stay tuned for the next episode, and remember to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell. Until next time, stay curious and stay unconventional.